there, this is Veena from Cupcakes, the channel that's about baking and much more. Okay then, let's get cracking with today's recipe. Welcome back. Today's recipe for saffron buns comes from Sweden, the land of ABBA and IKEA. Every year from the 13th of December, that is from the feast of Saint Lucia or Santa Lucia, up till Christmas week, these flavorful buns are found all over Sweden, in markets, in cafes, and in people's homes. The name Lucia being derived from the Latin word for light, the feast of Saint Lucia is celebrated in Sweden as the Festival of Light. Saffron buns are fragrant, fluffy and packed with flavor. So let me show you how these are baked right here at Cupcakes. Let's start by transferring 1/3 of a cup of lukewarm milk to a bowl. We'll add some more milk later on. This here is 3 tablespoons of sugar, but I'll add just 1 teaspoon of it to the milk now to quicken the blooming of the yeast. My regular sugar has large crystals, and so I had to grind it coarsely to help it dissolve more easily. If you have fine sugar, that would be best. Okay, let's give this a stir. To the lukewarm milk, I'll add 3/4 of a teaspoon of instant yeast. That's half a teaspoon and a 1/4 teaspoon. We'll set this aside for 2 to 3 minutes till I finish with sifting the flour. Now if you're using active dry yeast instead of instant yeast, you'll need 1 1/4 teaspoons of this, and you'll have to wait for around 10 minutes for the yeast to bloom. To 1 teaspoon of water, room temperature water, I'll add a large pinch, around half a teaspoon, of our star ingredient, saffron. I've crumbled it slightly. Now we'll let this steep for a couple of minutes. Into a large bowl, I'll sift 1 1/2 cups of maida or all-purpose flour. And then to it, I'll add half a teaspoon of salt and all the remaining sugar. And then stir it all up with a whisk. Here's our yeast. It took barely 3 minutes to bloom. And take a look at our saffron. It didn't take long for its flavor and color to be extracted. And by the way, saffron is believed to be the costliest spice in the world. But thankfully, as you just saw, even a pinch goes a long way. I'll now add half of a lightly beaten egg and half a teaspoon of ground cardamom to the yeast mix. For eggless buns, everything else remains the same, but then you'll need 1 to 2 tablespoons more of milk. If you don't have saffron, you could use half a teaspoon of turmeric powder and double the quantity of ground cardamom. The traditional recipe doesn't include cardamom, but I'm including it because I've found it makes these buns even tastier. Now let's stir everything well and transfer it to the flour mix. I'll start mixing the dough with a wooden spoon. Like I usually do while baking bread, I started with a little less of the liquid and will now add some more of it till the dough gets to the right consistency. I'll first add 2 tablespoons of extra milk and then see if we need to add any more. Oh, it looks like just 1 1/2 tablespoons would have done the job. But there's no cause for worry, we'll just have to add a little more flour. a little at a time though. Let's now transfer the dough to a flour dusted surface. I've added around 1 teaspoon of flour to the empty bowl to clean it up, and will add these scraps to the rest of the dough. It's now time to work the dough with our hands. It being a little sticky, we'll have to add some dry flour to it. Remember, we have to add only just how much the dough needs, nothing more than that. I'll first add half a teaspoon and work the dough for a few seconds. At this stage, we can mix in 25 grams of softened butter. That's a quarter of a 100-gram packet. Let's work this in gently so it can be uniformly incorporated into the dough. Now for the connection between saffron and Swedish cooking, the people of Sweden have been using spices like cardamom and saffron for a really long time, thanks to their spice trade with some Asian countries centuries ago. Time to work in another half teaspoon of flour. In a way, it's good I added a little more milk earlier on by mistake, because now you can see how the consistency of the dough can be easily adjusted. It's still too soft, so I'll add another half teaspoon of flour. That makes it 1.5 teaspoons of extra flour in all. The consistency has to be right. If the dough is too soft, it won't be able to hold its shape during proofing and also later on while it's baking. Okay, we won't need any more flour. So now I'll knead the dough for a couple of minutes, stretching and pulling it back on itself. Now a gentle reminder here. I'll be posting new videos around once a week. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel as yet, I urge you to do it right away. The notification bell will alert you every time I post another one of my quick and tasty recipes. When the consistency is right, the dough will no longer stick to your palm. Let's now check how stretchable the dough is. When you try to stretch it thinly and it keeps breaking, it indicates it's not yet done. I'll knead it for a minute more and check it again. As you can see, I can now stretch it into a very thin layer, which means our dough is ready for proofing. I'll shape it into a ball and transfer it back to the glass bowl, the inside of which I have drizzled with a little oil. Let's turn the dough ball around so it's uniformly coated with oil, and then cover it and set it aside for proofing. Our dough took 1.5 hours to double in volume. The proofing could take longer than this if you're using active dry yeast. I'll sprinkle a little dry flour on the dough so it won't stick to my fingers, and then punch it down to release the trapped gas. That done, we'll transfer the dough to a clean flour dusted surface, then gently flatten it and roll it into a log. I'll eyeball it and break the dough into 6 portions and roll each one into a ball. And now comes the fun part. Let's dust the work surface lightly and flatten the first ball. We'll shape it into a log and then draw it out into a long rope around 12 to 15 inches in length. But remember, if you add too much flour to the work surface, you'll find it difficult to do this. Now let's curl the 2 ends of the rope in opposite directions to form an S-shaped bun. Oh, just give me a few seconds and I'll grab the baking tray that I've already lined with butter paper. Let's push a raisin into the center of each spiral and transfer the bun to the baking tray. Let's shape the next bun. Now that all the buns have been shaped, we'll cover them and set them aside for the second proofing. That could take around 45 minutes. After 50 minutes, here are our plump saffron buns. I had used a large plastic bag to cover them. Look how well they've risen. Traditionally, these buns are given an egg wash, so they'll bake to a nice, shiny golden brown color. I, however, prefer to brush them with sweetened milk. This too will give them an attractive brown color, but it won't impart a shine to them like the egg wash does. But you could use egg wash if you want. We'll now bake the buns at 200 degrees centigrade for around 10 to 15 minutes. The buns took 12 minutes to bake. When they are done, they develop this golden brown color on top. As you can see, I'll have to separate them. I'll leave the buns on the tray for around 10 minutes and then transfer them to a cooling rack. Now that the buns are barely warm, let's check how they've baked. They're really soft and smell great. I'll tear one apart. It's light and fluffy, has a delicate yellow color and a strong smell of saffron. So here they are, our beautifully baked saffron buns. Believe me, they taste as great as they look. So do try out today's recipe. As you've just seen, these buns aren't difficult to make at all. Hope you enjoyed today's video. And do stop by again for yet another quick and tasty recipe. Till then, take care. Happy cooking!